Happy Sunday, guys. Let's talk about Knight Anoles. I was asking one of my videos, I believe it was Mr. Mike Corbett, who said, tell us why you're fascinated with Knight Anoles. It's an easy question. I mean, I think they're a beautiful lizard. I think I got my first one when I was a teenager, maybe 14 years old. Little female that I had. I used to work at a pet shop on the weekends, and it came in, so I took it home, fascinated by it. Back up just a minute, my first experience in the reptile hobby was with green anoles. My parents bought me 4 of them. I had them in a little 10-gallon aquarium, go out in the yard and chop up plants, put them in there. And I used to think those things were little dinosaurs. I mean, I was youngster, never been down to Florida at that time. They were the most exotic thing in the world to me. So fast forward a couple years from that, I had the opportunity to get their big cousin, the Knight Anole. Back then they were Cuban Knight Anole, is how everybody labeled them and named them. And subsequently over the years, I've had a bunch of Knight Anoles. I almost always, when given the opportunity, and if I had the space and the money, I would love to keep Knight Anoles. My goal was to keep them forever, to breed them, just to, as I got delved more into the hobby and did more research and the more literature that was available, Reptiles and Amphibian magazine, Vivarium magazine, Reptiles magazine, Tropical Fish Hobbyist magazine used to do an excerpt on keeping reptiles in the middle of it, and then the reptile hobby became more popular, so then they went ahead and made their own magazine. So I've been doing Knight Anoles for about well over 30 years now. They're not huge, but they're a big lizard. I love their green coloration. I love the yellow that shows up between their scales. It sort of looks like they got scale mail type armor on, the stripe over the shoulder, yellow, white, the stripe under the ear, the huge pink dewlaps. They're just a beautiful, beautiful lizard in my opinion, and I've always been fascinated by them. I never thought that I would ever get the opportunity to work with the more exotic Knight Anoles. And here I am, I find myself, I have a trio of Anoles smallwoodi, which is a beautiful lizard. I have a pair of Anoles barracoa, which equally beautiful. For some reason, when you look at who's selling what online, the smallwoodi always tend to be a little bit more expensive than the barracoa. I don't know. I think it's probably a toss-up, and I'm looking behind the camera at my 3 big cages that I have there. That's why I'm looking off into the distance. So anyways, that's why I love Knight Anoles. I've had them for a long time. I've been successful breeding them. Not this year with the Anoles equestris, but obviously I have quite a few Anoles smallwoodi hatchlings, and I have 4 or 5 Anoles barracoa hatchlings. I got more eggs incubating. So I don't know. I won't consider myself a successful breeder of them until I can do it, in subsequent years. Last year I had 17 Anoles equestris hatchlings. Sold them to people. Trey Beck got one. Given to some pet shops. This year I have none. Exact same, setups, exact same care, and I have not got a fertile egg from the female that laid all those eggs for me last year. So I don't know. Maybe it's good for them to skip a season. That's a whole lot of biological effort, I guess, on an animal to produce eggs, and the calcium in absorption that it must go through. So maybe it is good that she's not laying all those eggs again this year, and we'll see next year if I'm successful with the smallwoodi. I got a ton of baby smallwoodi. If I can do it again next year, then maybe I'll consider myself, I got the formula down. But that's this video today. I'm sorry I missed last weekend, but this video today is just all about Knight Anoles. I'm going to piece some footage together for you, just talking about how I care for them, and just why I'm fascinated with them. If you have any questions, obviously, please ask away. So that's what we're doing today. So hopefully what's coming you guys enjoy, and let's get to it. So this is just a small sample of some of the books that I've collected over the years, starting from when I was a teenager, probably to the most recent book I have, The Iguana Lizards of Cuba. Outstanding information. This is more of a scientific publication, not really geared towards hobbyists, but there's excellent information about, distribution, ecology, anything as far as them being studied in their natural habitat in Cuba. I love this book. You can see, hopefully you see okay, with a little bit of a glare there, but it's, I love anoles. Going through trying to dig up these books, I came across a correspondence that I had with Zanel Haberham. I believe he's from the Netherlands, and he's one of the founding members of the Anoles Contact Group. And we kind of went back and forth, just getting some information from him. This is probably when I first got a computer back in the mid '90s, when I could afford one. But I have collected and absorbed as much data as I could on the Knight Anoles, and folks nowadays are lucky with the internet, but back pre-internet and just when the internet for general public consumption was in its infancy, you had to have books. You had to go to the library. You had to find a good book in a reputable pet shop. But I have done a lot of research on any of the animals that I wanted to keep, but specifically I was always fascinated with anything dealing with anoles and Knight Anoles specifically. But I just wanted to show you guys kind of my obsession since I was very young. So these are my pair of Anoles Barracoa. That's Ricky the male and Lucy. Their care, like what I consider all of the crown trunk giants, the Knight Anoles, is similar to Equestris and Smallwood Eye. These guys are native to the western part of Cuba. Sizes are quite similar. You could figure hey pretty girl, a male's probably going to reach 5 to 6 inches snout to vent, another 2/3 for the tail, so we're talking 18 to 19 inches for their total length. And I'm just going to doing a kind of a profile of the specimens that I have, and at some point we may have already done it, but I'll just talk about general care for the Knight Anoles, the crown trunk giants. But right now I'm just sharing with you guys what I have. So there's a perfect example of a female with a huge dewlap. So sexual dimorphism in these guys. For the Smallwood Eye, there's some color variations, and we'll talk about that. But all of them, males and females, have beautiful dewlaps. But this is Ricky and Lucy, my pair of Anoles Barracoa. And again, well, not again, I don't think I've talked about it yet. This is kind of going to be a choppy video. I may say that more than once because I'm going to piece together some commentary and some footage. But these guys probably came into the hobby, the American hobby, via Europe. The United States has not had relations with the country of Cuba for quite a while, since the 50s. But Europeans have, Canadians have. So that's probably, from hobbyists in Europe and in Canada and other parts of the world. So these are the two adult females that I have together. I need to change out some of that dried up rapace there. Sorry for that. There we go. This little lady right here is Nancy. Nancy is one of the ones that I got Valentine's Day 2014. She is very calm compared to the other ones. You can look at her going dark. Obviously they don't like to be messed with too much. But here is Siri. Hey, pretty girl. Oh, there goes Siri. But let's see if Nancy will let me hold her for a second or two while we do this. Easy, pretty girl. So, you know, I've seen videos on YouTube of people with tame Knight Anoles, and they're crawling all around them and everything. I don't handle mine. I guess I probably could, because it would be pretty awesome if they'd stick with you. But I always thought, and I'm not criticizing, but I always thought if they're just staying on you like that, I don't know if they're cold or, you know, what the case is, but, you know, they ought to be an active, lizard that wants to get away from you. I guess, you know, that kind of flies in the face of having them as a pet. You want to tame them down and get them comfortable and not stress being around you. Let me see if I can get Miss Siri to come back over here. Hey, pretty girl. Easy. You know, so here's Siri, I hatched her in June of 2011. She was the only Knight Anole egg that I successfully incubated that year. And she is currently the longest term captive animal that I have. I've had her even longer than I've had my tortoise. I got him in July of 2011. But she is doing good. So she's 6 years old. We'll speak about some longevity. There is some literature on the internet that says Knight Anoles can live, 15 plus years. So, they're definitely not a throwaway lizard. It's not something that you get thinking, oh, in 2 or 3 years, that's their lifespan. They should live a good long while for you if you take care of them right. But so anyways, this is Siri, and that is Nancy. And those are 2 females that I'm currently keeping by themselves. Maybe someday I'll get a male for them, but I'll have to get them in a little bigger enclosure. I wouldn't want to just use this small, tall Exoterra for a trio of adult Knight Anoles. So this is one of my adult female Anolis equestris that I keep in a trio. This is Thelma. Thelma is who I believe is laying quite a few infertile eggs for me this year. I've not had any fertile equestris Knight Anole eggs. I have had her since Valentine's Day of 2014. I bought 3 Knight Anoles from a pet shop that has since went out of business, and she was one of them. But she's a beautiful girl. And again, an example of the pink under her throat, which would be where her dewlap is, just to show that females do have large pink dewlaps. Alright, so let's talk a little bit of husbandry for the Knight Anoles. They are a medium-sized lizard. I've already may have talked about it a little bit, but males can probably get 20 inches. There's some variation between the species. Anolis ludogalaris, I hope I didn't butcher that, but that is that's a species that is pretty rare in the hobby. I think there's only a few folks in the country that have them, but I think that is actually the largest species of Knight Anole, and they are from the eastern part of Cuba. Equestris, Barracoa, Smallwood-eye, they're 18 to 19 inches, but I think the ludogalaris could probably get about 20 inches long from some of the literature that I've seen. So and the reason I talk about their size, and that's for the adult males, females are going to be a little bit smaller, about 2 or 3 inches, is because their adult size is going to dictate what you need as far as a terrarium. I'm using Dragon Strand brand large breeder series enclosures for my I guess my breeding groups is what I call them. So they're 46 inches tall. It's 22 inches wide and 18 inches deep. Hopefully I got that right. I used to have all those dimensions down pat, but so taller rather than wider. Obviously they are an arboreal species. They are known as crown trunk giants. And the crown is the crown of trees. Trunk is, when they spend a lot of their time up in the crown in nature, and then they'll descend midway down the trunk to display to one another, try to attract females, maybe when they're hunting. So that is why they're called crown trunk giants. Tall enclosures. I would go no smaller, and I'm sorry for the glass, but I would go no smaller for a single adult, male anyways, than a small tall Exoterra. It's 24 inches tall and 18 inches on the bottom. This is two females. They're getting along good. Females can be territorial. I've had females that went at it with one another. That is why Nancy's in here, because she and the other two females that I have in with Sid, you see, I wanted to pair up Nancy with Sid at first, but they were not compatible, and then she was not compatible with the other two females. So as long as they're compatible, I would go no smaller than an 18 by 18 by 24 Exoterra. Bigger is always better. I know there will be people who tell me that these enclosures are too small, but okay, so we talked about enclosure size, no smaller than a small tall Exoterra. I guess that's kind of if we're talking about glass fish tanks, which some people still use them, that's a 29-gallon standard aquarium. I think is similar in size to a small tall Exoterra as far as square inches. They are diurnal, meaning they're daytime loving, so they do need full spectrum lighting. I use T5 high output strips for UVB. Those are Zoomed 5.0 bulbs in there. Now I think when I go to replace them, I will probably go to Arcadia bulbs, but it all depends on my finances at the time. So that's how they get their light as far as their UVB. And I'm using Zilla halogen mini dome lamps, 50 watts, because these particular enclosures are so tall that they can get away from it if they need to. But those are their basking spots. So, and I tried to be uniform when I set these enclosures up. Front left corner of all three of them have a basking spot. For this small tall Exoterra, I have a 25 watt bulb in there. These things kick off some heat. I really do like them. The bulbs tend to last quite a bit. As a matter of fact, I believe I've had these set up for going on 3 years now, and I've only replaced one of the bulbs. So I believe they're a good investment. They're small, economical, so I do like those bulbs. So we talked about size, we talked about UVB, the need for it, and then obviously you have to replace your UVB bulbs periodically. They do run out of efficiency and effectiveness with how much UVB they emit. Depending on brand, some people say 6 to 9 months. I think Arcadia markets itself as replacing every year. But on my bucket list, or on my shopping list for one day, wish list I guess I should say, is to get a UVB meter so I can actually test UVB output from a new bulb, and periodically to see when I need to replace it. Decorations, they love to climb, they love branches, vertical, horizontal, diagonal, foliage. I would love to do a naturalistic terrarium with these guys. This is a plastic vine. There's no live plants in here, but I think bioactive would be awesome. But you're going to miss eggs, and that's why I don't have these that way. That's why I have a dedicated egg laying container. There's jungle litter in there with the sphagnum moss on top, and I've talked about this in previous videos. I know when they've laid an egg because this will be all churned up. It'll be kicked out of the way, and I'll go in there and I'll search for an egg. All three of these, have the identical egg laying boxes, and they're all set up the same way. And I moisten that top layer, that way the soil on the bottom stays moist but not wet. and hopefully that's where they'll lay their eggs. Now, Lucy has laid eggs in the mulch, and I'm considering removing all this mulch so that she has no choice but to lay here. And also what I did was, in this plant, this is the only of the 3 big enclosures that has a live plant, I put rocks, river pebbles, big ones that she can't get out of the way, so that she doesn't try to lay eggs in the planter there. So a lot of climbing perches, naturalistic if you can do it. If it's just a display setup and you're not worried about breeding them, that's the way I would go. It'd be bioactive. I'd have all the bugs in there, and just do your best to make it look beautiful, because these are such spectacular display animals. Humidity, I don't track humidity. I probably should, but I don't. What I do is I have a Mist King system set up. That's what, I've got one nozzle in the front left corner of each of the big enclosures, and there's my Dusty Mist King and my 5-gallon Home Depot bucket. And this thing goes off 4 times throughout the day for 2 minutes at a time. So that's how I provide drinking water, as well as make sure that the environment is not too dry for these three enclosures. For the small enclosure, I just spray it off periodically. There's my big spray canister down there, and that's the same thing that I use for all of the babies and my spiny tail iguanas when I have them in here. Alright, so breeding, we'll call it springtime, but I think that's going to vary. February, March is probably when you'll start seeing breeding behavior. The females will become gravid. You can tell when they're nice and fat and plump in the midsection. Then they'll go down, and if you have it set up like I do, you'll be able to tell that she's laid an egg. I've never known them to lay 2 eggs. I've only ever seen 1 egg at a time. I do know there's some people who talk about double clutches, 2 at a time, but I've not read about that in any literature, but I have, seen people mention it in the some of the forums and groups and social media. Once you recover the egg, and I did an incubator update a couple of weeks ago, so you can refer back to that. But it's about 45 days. I incubate them at 84 degrees Fahrenheit and about 80% humidity. And right now I'm using the Pangea Hatch clay substrate. I hope you guys don't mind me just panning around looking at the enclosures. The lizards are like, they're all hiding. All my smallwood eye are, hiding behind this branch here. And all the equestris are hiding. They're all back there, and one of the females is behind that log. But I'm going to put some clips of them in there so you guys see all my critters. You'll see all my adult Knight Anoles. Alright, so I think we've covered all the basics as far as the enclosure. What do we feed them? They are omnivorous. They are both insects, they're mammals, chicks, but they also are prolific fruit eaters in nature. Figs, berries. In captivity, you can replicate that using crested gecko diet. Rapashi grubs and fruit is an excellent diet for them, and my male smallwood eye actually loves it. I think he eats it more than the females do. And while we're talking, we'll just look at this little beautiful baby right here who hatched a month ago today, June 23rd. But so sexual dimorphism, we'll switch from feeding to sexual dimorphism. This one, Anoles smallwood eye, is probably a female, and you can say that because she has the prominent cross bands. 1, 2, 3, 4. A male would not have cross bands over the shoulder, and that's the ones that are going vertically, not the one horizontal across the chest, but the vertical cross bands. So I believe that's how, that's going to be a female. My 2 adult smallwood eye females have the cross bands. The male does not, and some folks some folks on the internet have confirmed that with me. So I believe that is going to be a female. I have not, there is, other than size, meaning the overall total length and perhaps size of the head, there is, not that I know of, sexual dimorphism in Equestris or Barracoa. So here's an example of a slightly older hatchling. This guy hatched in March, and I believe that's going to be a male because there's no cross bands, and this is a smallwood eye, so there's no cross bands up in the top part of his torso. And so compare that to the female that I just showed you, and then we'll look at one other older one. See, I'm not going to be able to open the door on that one, but that little lady right there, let me see, we'll pull this out, but you can hopefully see the cross bands on that one, also indicative of a female. So if anybody's interested, I should be, as far as the smallwood eye, I should be able to tell you what the sexes are. And here is also another older hatchling who I believe is going to be a female, and you can see the cross bands on her, and she's starting to color up right nicely. She hatched in March. So I've highlighted how I keep the hatchlings before. I currently have 23 Anoles smallwood eye hatchlings and 5 Anoles Barracoa hatchlings. For the most part, I got most of them separated. I do have some that hatched within close proximity to one another. For instance, there's 3 in this little enclosure right here. You can see this little guy down here, and that one, and that one. Primarily they're kept separately. There's 2 in this one. So Hatchling Care, this room stays relatively warm, so they don't have basking lights per se. They do all have full spectrum UVB fluorescence, T5 high output, with the exception of these 2 enclosures right here, which have the a Zoom Ed 5.0 power compact in that dome up there. Not my preferred way of doing it, but you know, I'm not made of money. I got to do what I got to do. And if I end up, selling or taking some of these to a pet shop, I will definitely move these ones underneath the T5 high output fixtures. I have my Nest Cam set up because I took some footage of this female smallwood eye, one of my older ones, hatched out mid-March, eating some superworms. She's finally big enough to eat superworms, which is great. Messing with the baby crickets and the small mealworms can be a pain in the butt, but I mist them off at least once a day, sometimes twice a day. Get the humidity up, allow them to drink droplets of water off the sides of the enclosures and off the plants, the plastic plant leaves. But of course, if anybody's interested in some baby exotic Knight Anoles, not the Equestris, but I have smallwood eye and Barracoa, message me and we can talk about pricing. And so that's how I keep the babies. See, I told you green was my favorite color. There is my favorite marine aquarium fish, the undulated trigger. But anyways, I digress. We're talking about Knight Anoles. I think I hit on just about everything that I could relate without having a specific question about their care or how I do things. A lot of information on the internet about all the various species of crown trunk giant anoles that are native to Cuba. Obviously, Anoles equestris is also established down in Miami. I didn't talk about that. Southern Florida. A lot of the stuff that I've read over the years talks about how in the mid-50s, either as pets or as some sort of at a college, they were released into the wild. You hear the whole thing about storms and escapes, but the general consensus seems to be that they were deliberately released. There are a couple people in the hobby that are Knight Anole specialists. You got Ron St. Pierre down in Florida, who's got the albino Knight Anoles. He's doing projects with them. There's some other YouTube videos. I'm going to do a little shout out for a young man. I don't know what his first name is, but it's Maldonados Exotic Reptiles. He actually does some capture videos where he lives in Miami and he's just out in a park or something. He'll see a curly tail or a Miva or a Knight Anole, and he'll catch it and he'll talk a little bit about it. So he had asked me a little while ago to do a shout out, so there's your shout out, buddy. But yeah, I've been through Miami going on a cruise many years ago. Didn't do any sightseeing, didn't get out and see anything, but I would love to go down. And my understanding is the law is, since they're an invasive species, if you catch it, you're really not supposed to release it. You're supposed to keep it. But I don't know if I'd go down there to collect anything, but I definitely would take photographs. I would go down there and capture them on film and video. And Fairchild Tropical Gardens, I hear they got a very robust exotic anole population, not just Knight Anoles, but the Jamaicans and the cresteds, and obviously brown anoles are everywhere down in Florida. But I think that's probably going to wrap it up. But before I go, a huge thank you to all of you. I have 400 subscribers as of this morning when I checked my channel. 400 subscribers. I'm going to do another shout out to Trey and April Beck, because a year ago, he encouraged me to get in front of the camera, to not just show pictures of me feeding things with no sound. Maybe I'd add a little music clip to it or something, but I didn't do any dialogue. And it was his encouragement that I did a subscriber contest for him, and I actually talked, and on one of my videos for the first time. But I like doing this. I want to thank you guys for subscribing. The more you do it, the more comfortable you get doing it. So hopefully, the videos will get better, because I'll just, the editing and the music, and I need to branch out and do some other stuff with my videos. But 400 subscribers, that is awesome. So I want to thank you guys for that. I hope I didn't leave anything out. This is a lot of information, and basically I know I showed some empty cages because all the lizards were hiding, but I've tried to put some clips in there to show them in action, and good stuff like that, because I don't want it to be too boring. Somebody commented that I was boring. I don't know, maybe I am. But anyways, if you like what you see, hit the like button, send me a comment, share the video, tell folks about me, let them subscribe, and ask questions. I love answering questions in the comments, and I'll try to follow up in future videos. But anyways, I hope you guys have a great Sunday. It is hot out there. Bosque and Tiamat, my spiny-tailed iguanas, are loving their iguanariums and being outside. And so, the natural sunlight is great for them. Maybe I'll talk about Knight Anoles outside here in southeastern Virginia some other time. I've had good experiences with it, and I've had bad experiences with it. But I'm not going to, we won't delve into that today. So thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your Sunday and a great week until we meet again. Thanks. Bye.